Most people think power comes from force, from numbers, from weapons. But this story proves that sometimes the most dangerous power in a room is silence. If you stay until the end, you'll hear 6 quiet words that stopped a war before it even started. No one expected what Bumpy Johnson did after the insult was thrown at him. It was September 1948 when Sal Bonanno walked into Bumpy's restaurant, flanked by 6 armed men, and said the one thing you never say to the man who ruled Harlem. The insult cut through the room like a crack of thunder. Everyone expected the same outcome. Violence, chaos, a reaction. That's what Sal wanted. Because if Bumpy reacted, it would justify a full-scale takeover, a war. But instead, Bumpy smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind that tells you the ending has already been written, and you're just catching up. He stood slowly, folded his napkin, placed it on the table, and spoke words that would quietly reshape organized crime in New York. Harlem in 1948 wasn't the Harlem you see in movies. It was a kingdom, and Bumpy Johnson was its king. He didn't rule from a hidden office or an underground bunker. He ruled from Wells Restaurant on 135th Street, a modest place, red leather booths, checkered tablecloths, the smell of fried chicken and collard greens hanging in the air. But everyone who mattered came through those doors. Musicians, preachers, numbers runners, politicians, even police officers. Because Wells Restaurant was neutral ground. You could have problems on the street, but once you stepped inside, there was peace. Bumpy's peace. And Bumpy controlled something everyone wanted. Harlem's numbers operation. The game itself was simple. Small bets. 3 digits. If your number hit, you won. If it didn't, the house kept the money. But to the people of Harlem, it wasn't gambling. It was hope, a chance, however small, that this week might be different, that rent could be paid, that a child might get new shoes, that dignity didn't have to be borrowed. Bumpy didn't invent the game. A brilliant woman named Stephanie St. Clair did, known as Madam Queen. She ran Harlem's operation in the 1920s until outside forces tried to take it from her. When pressure turned into threats, she went to Bumpy Johnson. "Protect my operation," she told him, "and I'll make you the most powerful man in Harlem." Bumpy kept his word. By 1948, millions of dollars flowed through Harlem every year, and none of it answered to anyone outside the neighborhood. That didn't sit well elsewhere. Negotiations failed. Threats were ignored. So Joe Bonanno sent his nephew, Sal the Butcher Bonanno, to handle the problem personally. And that brings us to the night everything changed. September 19th, 1948, 8:47 p.m. Wells' restaurant was packed. The jukebox played Dizzy Gillespie. Smoke curled toward the ceiling. Bumpy sat in his usual corner booth, positioned so he could see both doors and the kitchen. His wife sat across from him, calm, composed, observant. Bumpy ate his steak the way he did everything else. Slow, deliberate, controlled. Then the door opened. Sal Bonanno walked in first. Tall, broad, calm in the way only dangerous men are. Behind him came 6 others, armed, obvious about it. Conversation stopped. Forks froze midair. Even the jukebox seemed to fade. Sal walked straight to Bumpy's table. "Bumpy Johnson," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We need to talk." Bumpy didn't look up. "I'm eating," he said. Sal smiled, complimented the restaurant, then delivered the message. Harlem needed to get with the program. The numbers operation was changing hands. Bumpy would be compensated. 10%. Enough to save face. Not enough to keep power. The room held its breath. Bumpy set down his knife, dabbed his mouth, looked up. "That's generous," he said calmly, "but I'll have to pass." That's when the line was crossed. The room went silent. Not the kind of silence where people listen. The kind where people calculate. Bumpy didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't react. Because Bumpy Johnson, perfectly still, was more dangerous than most men in motion. He reached into his vest. Sal's men tensed. Bumpy placed a razor on the table. Carefully, calmly. "You brought 6 men into my restaurant," Bumpy said softly. "And you think that makes you powerful?" He stood and looked around the room. "You see these people? They're not customers. They're family." Then he gave Sal a choice. An apology. A quiet exit. A message delivered back to Joe Bonanno. Or stay and learn why this was called Bumpy's Kingdom. Sal had built a reputation on fear. But standing there, surrounded by 40 silent faces, he felt something else. Real fear. Bumpy smiled again. Then he said 6 words. "Your uncle will bury you tomorrow." No shouting. No threats. Just certainty. Guns were raised. Bumpy didn't blink. "You can pull those triggers," he said. "But you won't leave Harlem alive. Not tonight. Not ever." Seconds passed. Then Sal lowered his weapon. One by one, the others followed. He apologized and walked out. When the door closed, the restaurant stayed quiet for a moment. Then applause. Not celebration. Respect. 3 days later, the 5 families met in Manhattan. Revenge was discussed. So was war. Then Frank Costello ended the conversation. "Bumpy Johnson runs Harlem because Harlem wants him to. Leave it alone." And they did. From that night on, no one tried to take Harlem by force. Deals replaced threats. Respect replaced arrogance. Sal Bonanno died a few years later, officially of natural causes. What really happened, no one knows. But here's what we do know. After that night in September 1948, no one ever disrespected Bumpy Johnson in his own restaurant again. And the razor on that table, he never had to use it. Because sometimes the strongest weapon isn't violence. It's loyalty. If stories like this, about power, respect, and quiet strength, matter to you, hit like and subscribe. You'll find more stories here where history didn't change because of bullets, but because someone refused to back down. And tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone control a room without raising their voice?